All team, give it everything you got.
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
I don't think there's anything more important in the Star Wars universe than the fans.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
With your hosts, Teresa Delgado, Trisha Barr, and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of it.
Hi, Yub Cubs, and welcome to episode 54 of Fangirls Going Rogue. My name is Teresa, and with me are my awesome co-host friends and a special guest. First up is Trisha from Fangirl Blog and Hyperspace Theories. Look at me. I didn't use your last name.
You did not.
I did not.
I am the T-bar of
The
podcasting.
T-bar. What does that make me? Actually, what does that make Sarah? Sarah, you're Sarah from Skywalking Through Neverland. What would you be the?
Oh, I'm the SW,
Whoa.
which can also be the Star Wars. I'm just saying. I have the same initials as Star Wars.
You could also be the SWO if you just take the WO.
That's true. But actually, my middle name is Anne, so I'm Saw.
Saw. Oh.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Are you going to shake your fist at the Death Star beam?
Yes? What? I've never seen the Saw movies, so I don't know what you're talking about.
No, I'm talking about Saw.
Okay.
In Rogue One. Yeah.
Saw, lies, deception.
Yes.
That's all.
It's funny. And also with us, you just heard him, Ajua Adama. He is one of the admin of our Facebook group. So if you are part of our group, you've interacted with him. Hey, man, what's up? Thanks for coming on the show.
What's up now? How's it going, you guys?
We're good. You're the AA.
Yeah.
That sounds weird. Never mind. I take it back.
Ajua had to come on because he's the expert. He has to be. How many times have you seen The Last Jedi now?
I am up to 9 times, and that was probably the quickest 9 I've done.
Wow.
Because, I mean, this film is just so intricate, so deep, and so clever that I never got tired of seeing it. And just also from a visual perspective, it's just such a piece of art. And even though the other films I enjoy and Force Awakens I enjoyed, after a while I started getting sick of it and I had to take a break before I could try to see it again. And this film, I just never grow tired of it. I never grow tired of it.
So let's just give our numbers, everybody. I've seen it 4 times, and I actually got tweeted at because I've been seeing other movies, and people have been saying, how can you go see something else when The Last Jedi is in theaters? And I'm like, well, Tom Hanks is in theaters now, so I have to go see The Post. So
yeah, I want to see that too.
Right.
Yeah,
I can tell you guys, if you want to go see The Post, it's really great, entertaining, and relevant. Okay. But anyway, so I've seen it 4 times. Sarah?
Wow. Yeah, I've seen it 3 times with the 4th scheduled for Richard's birthday, which is the 16th.
And Trisha?
7 now.
7.
Wow.
And it'll be 8 this weekend. By the time this goes up, 8.
Very cool. Well, something we do want to mention that's kind of pertinent since Ajua, you are here. We are coming up on our 1-year anniversary of our Facebook group. So if you're listening to this and you've not joined us, now is a great time to join us for year 2. All you have to do is go to Facebook and search for Fangirls Going Rogue, and our group will pop right up. There are a few screening questions, but after you answer those, we'll let you in and you can join our small little family of fans. It's really fun. It's a safe, positive environment, and I love that. So are you guys ready to jump into the news?
Woohoo!
As many of you know, I love award shows. I don't know why. I always have as a kid. And we just had the Golden Globes, which is the kickoff to award season. And there was a lot of Star Wars references. So one of the first things I noticed is that Ron Howard and Emilia Clarke came out to they came out to present awards, and they were both introduced as being from Star Wars. And it took me a minute because I was like, from Star Wars? Oh, Solo. But they didn't say Solo. And I got really confused. And then it was shortly after that, I think it was like the next day, that Ron Howard went back on his teasing of things from Solo, and he sent out a tweet that said, "Happy New Year from Team #Solo. We're pretty pumped for 2018. It's just like the picture of like a cockpit of a ship."
Is that the one with the gloves?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that also the one with the acid wash jeans?
Yes. Yes.
He's such a tease.
Well, it's just like Trisha mentioned, there has not been a trailer for this movie, but we keep getting these pictures, and I'm just like, okay, I want a trailer now.
Are you impatient?
No. What are you talking about? Never. Trailer
soon. I would say definitely. I'm feeling by the Super Bowl we'll have seen something.
Mm. Yes.
So.
Between that and, of course, when Black Panther comes out, because that'll be out the weekend, I think, after the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they'll want it in to be able to put it in front of those type of big movies, just like we got to see Black Panther and all sort of Avengers, Wrinkle in Time in front of the Last Jedi.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I guess we have to talk. We're going to talk about people coming out presenting. We have to talk about Natalie Portman.
Yeah, this is for the Golden Globes, right? So we're back to the Golden Globes.
The Golden Globes coming out, and she was presenting for the Best Director category, and she just had to drop that little zinger in there.
We are honored to be here to present the award for Best Director.
And here are the all-male nominees.
Yeah.
Well, I saw a great picture on Twitter that put together stills from right before she did it and right after.
After she did, I saw that.
And the look right before was like, should I do this? And then the look after was like, yeah, I just did that. And when it happened, I lost it. I was like, yes, that was hilarious. Do it again. And she was with Ron Howard, and his face was like, okay.
Yeah.
Next. Yeah, it was definitely. Well, the thing is that Natalie Portman has actually advocated for female directors in the movie she's been in. She had advocated for Patty Jenkins on Thor 2, and it fell through, and Natalie almost fell through on that movie too, but it's one of the reasons that she kind of had a parting of ways with Marvel. So this is her.
And she is a director.
Yes.
Well.
Yes, absolutely. She directed in that anthology with Jiang Wen from Rogue One. So,
Wow.
There you go.
Yep.
And so I thought she's following through on definitely who she is for a person.
Yeah, wow, that took balls for her to come out and say that. And I think it was right after Oprah's speech, I believe.
It was right after Oprah's big speech.
Yeah, so everything was all like, yeah, female empowerment, exciting, amazing. And then Natalie comes out, and I think that's possibly why she was emboldened to say that right then. So, I think it worked in the moment, and that whole night was very rife. Like, I don't know if you guys saw the red carpet beforehand as well, but, all the women wore black, and all the men wore the pins that said time's up, and basically time is up for sexual harassment in the workplace. And that's what they were mostly advocating on that night. But it was very interesting, a different awards show to watch because of that.
Well, and we always talk about George Lucas would typecast his actors, and you can see kind of Padme, and I mean, she didn't have to stretch too far, I think, to play that role. I mean, that was that same look in her face, kind of like, well, I'm just going to get up there and I'm going to take charge of the situation. I'm going to get my little zinger in, and she did. So, and right before the Golden Globes, there were pictures of another prequel trilogy actor and fan favorite working out with his beard, my Ewan McGregor, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who happened to also be at the Golden Globes, and he won for Fargo. So, and then, of course, nobody wanted to ask him about Fargo. They all wanted to ask him about Star Wars.
Well, hello. You freaking look like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
That's because he is. He is the sexiest version of Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I just need them to go ahead and announce that they're making a Kenobi movie because it's happening. I don't care if they're planning it or not. It's happening because have you looked at him? Mm-hmm. Have you? Have you really?
You guys have seen that fan trailer that's been trending?
Yes,
recently.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good though.
It's so funny because I think he's giving the same line to reporters that Harrison Ford gave back in the day when they would ask him about episode 7 and nobody was signed at the time. It's like it's like word for word the same sort of song and dance. Like, you'll know when I know nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he did say to one of the journalists that was asking him questions, he said that I saw the new one over Christmas. I thought it was really, really beautiful. I loved it. So, hey, he likes what's going on. So just sign the man.
Or show the paperwork.
Really, just to make an announcement. And then we also had another Star Wars alum that won a Golden Globe. Laura Dern won a Golden Globe for her work on Big Little Lies, which after all of the attention that Big Little Lies got at the Golden Globes, I really want to watch it now. It was already on my list, but now even more, I want to watch it. And also, Emma Watson is like ecstatic about Big Little Lies, and anytime Hermione likes anything, then I like it too. So,
nice.
I'm easily influenced. Apparently,
that's okay. Well, you know what? Laura Dern did give a fantastic speech, so let's hear a little bit of that.
Many of us were taught not to tattle. It was a culture of silencing, and that was normalized. I urge all of us to not only support survivors and bystanders who are brave enough to tell their truth, but to promote restorative justice. May we also please protect and employ them. May we teach our children that speaking out without the fear of retribution is our culture's new North Star.
So from that speech, speaking of typecasting, Laura Dern is Admiral Holdo.
You think?
She had that same, the same aura, the same presence.
People who grew up on Jurassic Park, she was like the feminist in a movie before there were feminists in movies in that way. She was just unabashed about it in the whole movie. There are so many great lines in there. She's like, we'll discuss it after I save your life, or however those all go. She's just so great in that movie too.
Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs eat man. Woman inherits the earth.
That's funny though what you guys think of, because when I think of Jurassic Park and I think of her character, there's two specific scenes that come to mind. The one where she's sticking her hand in the dinosaur poop to check it. Right. And then the other one is talk about ballsy. And then the other one is when she's running away from the raptors and her leg is like all screwed up and she's like limp running. Mm-hmm. You know, those are the two scenes that come to mind.
That's when she was saving the old guy's butt, right? She had to go out there and do it.
Oh, yeah, because she was going to go turn the power back on.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. She really was a feminist before that was a thing.
Yes, she was.
Wow.
Yes, she was.
Well, you know what? Speaking of feminism or females in Star Wars, let's head to this Forces of Destiny comic.
Oh, yeah. So the first two issues of the IDW comic for Forces of Destiny, which is kind of a part of the Star Wars Adventures line that IDW is doing, have come out. So it's the first one has Leia on the cover. Well, she's on the cover of cover A on a Tauntaun. And this one, it has Leia, Han, and Hera in it. And I actually have that. I mentioned it to my husband that I wanted it. He went to our comic book store and picked it up for me. And it's so good. And what's interesting about this series is it's kind of a micro series. They're only doing 5 issues. And one comes out each week. So we have a Rey one as well that came out this week. And what's really cool about it is the ones that are coming up are going to be sort of extensions of some of the episodes that we've seen. So there's an Ahsoka Padme one coming up. That's an extension of the episode. The next one to be released next week is Hera alone. It's just a Hera comic. And then we will also have the last one will be Rose and Paige.
Oh,
and so I'm really excited for them.
Are they like the normal length of a comic?
They are a normal comic length.
Okay.
And the artwork is phenomenal. IDW is actually my favorite of the comic publishers because they tend to use brighter colors, the way that they put their cells together, and the way they show text and sound and things is just it's better for my eyes or something than Marvel or DC, which tend to be darker. And so, you know me, I'm a bright colored rainbow girl. And so IDW
except when you're the dark side girl.
I have split personalities.
She's dual sided.
Yeah,
dual nature.
These are My Little Pony and rainbows and Darth Maul. I can be
both. They're really
There's
cute.
nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong. Leia in this one is learning about a tauntaun, and the writers said that the tauntaun was like Han, and that they were both uncontrollable, and she was going to have to learn how to deal with the tauntaun and learn a lesson on how to deal with Han. So just based on that alone, everybody enjoy. Go get it and enjoy because it's really fun.
It is really fun. And if you want to wait, if you want to get them all together, they are going to come out as a trade. And so if you're a non-comic person, that means that they put all of the issues together in one volume. And that's supposed to come out sometime in April. So if you don't want to go hunt down the 5 individuals, you can get them together as a trade in April.
Oh, that's good to know. Well, yay. Well, you know what is coming out this year? It's the final... What?
It's so sad.
Oh, I know. The final end of season 4 of Star Wars Rebels. And that's
they're all going to die.
No. This is for kids. They can't all die.
I just got some visions of Disney's Atlantis when you said that.
Right? Wow. Oh my God.
Spoiler.
Man.
I haven't seen it.
Well, we know Hera's not going to die.
Or Chopper.
Right.
Or Chopper.
And see, that's one of the reasons why I like the one of the episodes the first part of season 4 is when they start to split apart, and then she goes through and does that holdo maneuver, sort of, and does hyperspace right through the station before she heads back up to the Rebel base. And I said to myself, uh-oh, this is the beginning of the end. Because all the characters that we know survived this thing are now separated from all of the characters we have no idea what's about to happen. This could be the beginning of the end, and they could all, like you said, the ones on Lothal are all going to be gone. And these are the only 2 left, right? And we'll see what happens.
Oh, yeah. Well, speaking of that, I mean, Dave Filoni's tweet said he posted a picture of the soundstage where they're recording, and he's looking out a window onto the recording musicians, which is a full orchestra, by the way. Very excited about this. And there's it's backlit. The white Lothcat is in there. Only you can see his silhouette. And he writes the final music for #Star Wars Rebels. Thank you, Kevin Kiner. #follow the white Lothcat. So it's very poetic. Dave Filoni is always very poetic.
He's great.
And full orchestra spells tears and doom.
Yes.
The last time we had a full orchestra, you all know what happened when Ahsoka walked away and everybody was like, oh my goodness, what in the world is going on with this thing? So
I know. I'm so eager to know what we will hear, but at the same time, very trepidatious. I'm in trepidation.
See, I would be okay if Rebels decided to go Game of Thrones and not come back for like 2 years.
No, bad.
Because I don't want to know. I want to know, but I don't want to know. And then once it's over, it's over. And then you have to wait for another announcement for another animated show. It's just too much for me to handle.
You'll be okay.
Sorry.
You'll be okay. Speaking of that, now looking back on it, because there's so much language of The Last Jedi in Star Wars Rebels, I mean, you could just go for a long time. But the Ahsoka at the end of that season 2, it was our preparation for Luke in The Last Jedi. It was just a kinder, gentler version of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, some of the same symbolism is there, when like Luke looking into the tree, that force tree, it has that same kind of crag or gap as is in the artwork from Dave Filoni with Ahsoka. Yeah, it's just crazy. And then of course, white Loth wolves look so much like our lovely crystal foxes.
What was that? White Loth what? What?
Loth wolves?
Wolves?
Wolves? Did I say wolves? Whatever. I say
it doesn't
wrong.
matter. You and I both say it the same, so it's cool.
It's too hard. It's too hard to wrap my lips around that word.
I don't like that word. Anyway. Well,
but Dave and Ryan, they definitely fall from the same tree. They're artists that have each other's minds held in their hands. Because if you look at a lot of what Dave has done over the last several years, and you see what a lot of things that Ryan does in The Last Jedi, they parallel a lot of things, and they have very similar senses of humor, and the use of animals to help, especially at critical moments, which of course something that that George also threw in, especially into the original trilogy, if you count the Ewoks as sentient animals to a certain extent. But it's just that they love nature, and they love to explore those elements in their artwork, even in some of their past projects. And, it really comes to a fruition in the sense where you see these things overlap in the films, and then you throw in the sound because, of course, they incorporated a lot of the sound effects from, not to say a lot, but there's a few sound effects that, come from both the Clone Wars and Rebels. And so you kind of get that back and forth to where you're starting to kind of feel a synergy between the artists that are putting all this together. And that's what I really appreciate, especially when I see a new film like this.
Awesome. What sound effects do you have in mind? Do you have any examples?
So there were a couple. Let me see if I can remember exactly now. I just read an article recently, and I remember hearing about it in the film. I'm trying to think about what it is. All right. So on Canto Bight, and you have those speeders that the police are searching Finn and Rose for they're flying around through the city, and it sort of kind of feels like like a prequel world, especially if you think about some of the sounds that they use in Coruscant. In Clone Wars, you remember when the droid police were oftentimes seen, flying through the city, and they had a distinct klaxon sound with their sirens. It's the same sound that those speeders make when they're searching for Finn and Rose through Cantania. And then there was another one, it's escaping me right now, from Star Wars Rebels. Oh, when the saber is split in half. So you have both Kylo and Rey trying to get access to Anakin's lightsaber, and then using the Force to try to grab hold of it, and it's kind of sitting in between both of them, and then it finally splits. Well, basically, when you remember the time when Ezra and Maul are, working with the the holocrons, and they were combining them. At that second episode of season 3, and then you remember there is that blinding white light, and then all of a sudden there's a flash, and then there's an explosion. They used the exact same explosion because they felt that the power behind those crystals, or behind a saber like that it would explode, would be very similar to something like a holocron exploding as well. Whoa. And so they decided to throw that in there too.
Wow. That's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I want to talk just a quick second about box office for The Last Jedi.
Woohoo!
And the woohoo money. So
it's our movie. What did our movie make?
So as of Sunday, these are my numbers. As of Sunday, January 7th, these are the numbers. So as of Sunday evening, the film is sitting on $572.5 million in the States, furthering its position as the #1 movie of 2017. In the all-time domestic chart, it consolidated its spot into 6th place and closed in further on The Avengers. So let's see, what else? It's closing in on fifth place, which would be episode. I'm trying to remember. Fifth place. Fourth place is Jurassic World.
Okay.
So, and I think The Avengers is fifth place right now. Worldwide, its cumulative total has risen to $1.2 billion, placing it in 13th position, right behind Iron Man 3. Yeah.
Cool.
So it's doing well. I mean, obviously, it doesn't have the same push that The Force Awakens did, which is the first Star Wars film in years. So, I mean, that's going to be hard, but it's not like doing bad either, which some people seem to be making it seem like it's not doing well. Sorry, it is.
Yeah, well, the second weekend was a little low, actually, just because of Christmas and everything,
Holidays.
Christmas Eve. Yeah, holidays. But then it like really ramped up the third weekend, and it actually is right now the second fastest grossing film ever. Now, that'll probably be surpassed in a little bit by Titanic and Avatar, because those were like crazy long running films. But right now it's the second fastest grossing.
And if you follow Steven Stanton, he constantly tweets these numbers out.
We have to see where it all shakes out.
Yeah. Well, we can't go end the news without getting some Disney news in there. But this time it's Disney and Star Wars news, because RunDisney is back on the West Coast / anywhere you are, because it's a virtual race.
Woo! Guess what? I get to get my first RunDisney medal, and I can run half a mile if I want to. I don't have to do it all at one time.
Well, here, so let me tell you guys what I'm talking about. So, I don't know, you may or may not know, but all the races at the West Coast, so at Disneyland Park for 2018 and possibly beyond, have been canceled because of construction or the city of Anaheim or both. So
depending on who you ask.
Exactly. So what happened was a lot of people had actually signed up for the Star Wars Half Marathon Light Side here. That's supposed to happen next weekend and won't happen. And so people who were doing that, plus going to the Star Wars Half Marathon Dark Side at Walt Disney World in April, they usually get this special Kessel Run medal, which is the best medal ever because it's the Millennium Falcon. So basically there was a lot of upset people. And so what RunDisney has done was announced a 2018 Star Wars virtual half marathon. So from January 3rd to February 28th, you can actually register for this virtual race at RunDisney.com, and you can complete 13.1 miles wherever you are on a treadmill. You don't have to complete them all at once. So like Teresa, you can do a half mile at once. No. You can run after your car.
Darn.
I know. Well, actually, honestly, it's probably you have to send in an email saying you have completed them. Like, they don't actually check. Like, look at your running device and say, oh, you didn't run this. Well, you can't do it. Basically, what you do is if you pay $59, you're going to get a Star Wars finisher medal, which has Poe Dameron on it. Trisha.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm going to get it. And you know what? Sarah, quit taking the magic out of it. Okay?
Why?
I'm going to run 13.1 miles slowly.
Okay.
On a treadmill while I watch movies.
You know what? Why don't you watch a Star Wars film? You can watch The Force Awakens while running. And there you have it.
Yeah.
So
just over and over, because I don't know if I can do 13.1 miles walking in 3 hours.
Yeah. But just so you know, so $59 gets you just that medal plus a downloadable race bib plus a downloadable finisher certificate. Now, if you want to be eligible for the Kessel Run Challenge, which means you are already signed up to run the Walt Disney World Star Wars Half Marathon Dark Side, you can be eligible to do that if you pay $69 to run the virtual race. And then once you complete the half marathon at Walt Disney World, you will get the ultimate Millennium Falcon Kessel Run medal.
Woohoo!
So it's super exciting, and I'm actually really happy about these virtual races, because I think it's good. Like people like you, Teresa, who's never gotten to run one, can now do it.
Well, and I think it's also good for people that are scared of running.
Yeah, that's
in
true.
a big marathon type of thing, which that's totally me. That's intimidating me on so many levels, and I just kind of don't ever want to do it. But if it's virtual and I don't have to run in front of people, then I'm good.
And if you're on a treadmill, you can go to the bathroom whenever you want.
Exactly. All right. Well, we've talked about The Last Jedi off and on over the course of the news. So let's get into it. That's why we have Audrey here, is we want to talk about some of the bigger themes and just things that have come up for us as we've watched the movie multiple times. So Trisha, I will let you start us off.
You know, we all have our first impressions, and we've seen people say this consistently. Watch it again. You'll enjoy it better the second time or the third time. Some people the eighth or ninth time. So what's one thing for everybody that you changed your opinion on or saw it differently after seeing the movie again?
Okay, I'll jump in. Definitely Luke's end. The first time you see it, so much happens in the film, and then Luke is like so triumphant in one moment, and the next moment he disappears, and it's like you got the wind knocked out of you, and you don't know what to think. And I think that's why many people come out of the movie, or at least I did, with these perplexed looks on their faces, because it's just hard to take in. So the second time I saw it, knowing that was coming, everything before that, like especially Luke and Leia, when he appears in the cave, you know what to look for. You know he doesn't have footsteps. Like all of that leading up is so much more emotional and intense, and it makes sense the second time. So I think for me, it really changed my opinion and made me really love the film.
I was one of those people that loved the film from the beginning. And one thing I'll say real quick is that I'm not somebody who shies away from spoilers. And I was the person that would read the book before the film came out, because it never spoiled my enjoyment of the film when I actually saw it. And because of that, I'm probably one of those people who enjoyed the prequels even more, because I didn't go in with all these expectations. I knew what the story was. I knew where it was going, and I just wanted to see it. I wanted to hear it. I wanted to listen to the music, all that kind of stuff. And that's always been the visceral experience for me. This film, they kept a lid on this thing. And I think the reason why is because the people working on this film knew that they had a very strong film, and that it would be controversial, it would be artistic, but at the same time, it would cause and spark debate. And they were like, there's too much going on in this film. None of y'all gonna find out about this until you see it in the theater. And so this is one of the first, since I was a kid and seeing the original trilogy, this was one of the first Star Wars films in a long time that I did not know what was going to happen going into the film. And I'm so glad that I didn't, because it was one of those kinds of things where as you're going through the film, you're trying to, experience things, but you're also trying to figure things out. There's a lot that goes on, even in the lines that people say. And so what I would say is that as much as I enjoyed it going through the first time, what I didn't realize is how much foreshadowing takes place in the film. And the film basically spoils itself. So even if you don't know what's about to happen before you actually see the film, if you pay attention to what people say, they basically are telling you everything that's about to happen after that. So Kylo comes in and they're force Skyping for the first time, and he says, this can't be you. It'll, this kind of effort would kill you. Of course, we see that at the end of the film. And when Leia, resuscitates herself and she floats back over to the Raddus, and then she splits the Snoke's ship, right in the middle, the same way that Holdo is going to do it later. And, Luke is talking to Rey, and he says, what do you expect me to do? I'm going to, stand up in front of the First Order with a laser sword and take on the entire, armada myself. And of course, that's exactly what happened. There's all kinds of things that are just sprinkled throughout the film. And there's just so much foreshadowing from almost every scene. That's what really tickled me to death the second time going through, is I was able to pick up on a lot more of that. Just to realize just how clever his writing was for this film.
For me, the whole process of seeing the movie was just more of a processing kind of thing and understanding the story that they were trying to tell us. There wasn't anything that really upset me in any way or whatever. I'm pretty good with just being able to accept what the story is that the storytellers are trying to tell me. I think maybe the only thing I had, that was kind of weird for me was Chewbacca almost eating a pork. Like, that kind of made me a little confused. But then
he already roasted the thing.
But then I read the new canon book, Chewie and the Porgs. It's not really canon, guys, but it's not. But it's canon adjacent. Chewie and the Porgs, which tells a fantastic story about Chewie and the Porgs that we didn't know from the movie. So,
okay. Trisha?
Teresa, we had a discussion with Kai right after the movie about Paige's death.
Oh, there's also that.
Yeah. And, it was interesting because at the time it was kind of like, oh man, it felt like, did she have to die? Was this like fridging a character just for it to happen? And I ended up thinking about it a lot and thinking about the context of the movie and thinking about how many people die in the movie and how much more context it gives to everybody. It's not just Rose's story, it's to everybody's story in the Resistance that we see her and what happens and her, the fight she has in her. And she actually, Audra, as you say, she essentially foreshadows what Rose says at the end of Finn, which is, we do this, we fight for the people we love. And that's what she grabs that necklace. She doesn't say it, but we see the visual, and it's very powerful that she's doing it for somebody in that moment. So I'm always like, oh gosh, when female characters die, you have to think about it. But I think we knew a lot of people were going to die. A lot of people were dying. It gave it more weight to things, but it isn't there just solely to drive Rose's story. So that's one thing, but I kind of had to absorb it and think about it. There was a lot going on, obviously, that the first time everybody sees it. So, but that's one thing that I changed my mind. I'm like, it would, if it had just been somebody, okay, would have been a death, but it ties it all together. It happens all for context.
Yeah, I was saying, if I remember correctly, I think that was one of the touches that Carrie Fisher threw into it, because she was talking. There was a piece that came out before the film came out. They were talking about jewelry, and she said that there should be a little bit of a touch into the film that that pertains to jewelry and personal items that link people together. And so I think that was something that she suggested. She didn't go into great detail in that particular article, in that interview, because she didn't want to spoil the film, obviously. But I think that's what she was referring to. So that actually might be, that crescent medallion that both of them are wearing. I think that might be something that she threw into the story that would link those two sisters together.
You know who else has jewelry on him? This is such a good segue now.
Oh. He wears his mother's ring around his neck to give to the special someone he will have someday.
That's from the Visual Dictionary. Yes.
Yeah, I may have read that somewhere.
Teresa wanted to talk about this one specifically, so
I did. So Oscar Isaac is a huge fan of the ship of Poe Finn. In fact, he calls them Storm Pilot. And he is having a little bit of trouble with the fact that Finn has had interactions with someone other than Poe. He says specifically he was asked when he was doing an interview for the BAFTA Awards, and he said, quote, "Look, it was a little difficult to see my man kiss somebody else, but you got to give up control. You got to watch some stuff you don't want to watch sometimes." So what's Oscar Isaac getting real with all of us that sometimes it's just not what you want.
You know what? I think he's a romantic at heart. Both Poe and Oscar Isaac, and so beating after my own heart there. Trisha, you're gonna have some competition.
Yeah, the competition.
Wait a minute, I was on the Poe bandwagon from the beginning.
I know,
the very beginning. I just want people to know that he's turning into Jag. Literally, Jag became a reluctant leader, had to learn some hard lessons. Yes, he is.
Yeah,
so
that's true.
Yeah, he's turning into Jagfell.
Wow.
It's happening. I still laugh too because they're like, oh yeah, this isn't like the expanded universe except for Leia and Han's son tries to shoot the Millennium Falcon down. Yep, I think that happened in the books. There's so many things that happened in the books in the last two movies that I'm like, well, yeah, there's still a lot of things.
There's a lot.
It may not be a direct play, but there's a lot of things that happen. Maybe that's because they're good stories.
Well, it would be a shame if they didn't reference that material, you know.
In some way, yes.
Yeah.
We definitely. And I know, Adjoa, you wanted to talk about failure. So what do you see as failure in this movie as far as a theme?
Yeah, this film is a tapestry of failure, and you see on both sides of the conflict in just about every major character in the film. And honestly, the film begins with a decision, and if that decision is not made, then I think more than half of the events that you see in the film don't actually occur the way that they do. It begins with Poe and this Pyrrhic victory that he is associated with the sinking of this dreadnought, right? So his job at the beginning of the film is to distract the First Order fleet so that they get off the planet and then they jump to light speed, not realizing obviously that they're going to be tracked. And all they have to do is just get away, and then they should be fine. And his thing is, the way that I look at it is that he's very much like Maverick in Top Gun. He's your best pilot. You can't divorce yourself from him because you need people like this. But at the same time, he's not emotionally mature. So he wants to jump in there. He wants to get into the fray. He wants to get into the action. And at the same time, he's not wise enough yet to pause and think about what's going on and to elicit patience, which oftentimes is much more of a virtue in winning wars than, just prowess and skill and proficiency. So he decides, after he destroys those surface cannons, which of course they now can't use against the bombers or even, the flagships. He says, look, we need to bring these bombers in now, and we need to get rid of this thing because it's a fleet killer. It's going to take us out, later on. And what ends up happening, of course, is that without thinking, all they have to do is just get away. But now all of a sudden, after this dreadnought has destroyed the base, now they have enough time where they can take those cannons and, change them around and start targeting the fleet. And all that time, these bombers start going down. And, history is, replete with these Pyrrhic victories, where basically a Pyrrhic victory is this. It's a victory for your side, but it comes at such great cost that it basically is like a failure. And it's actually named after Pyrrhus, who was a Greek king who went after the Romans. And even though he routed them several times, he lost his best troops and 7,500 casualties, to the point where he could no longer actually continue this campaign, even though he had won these major battles. And at one point in time, he said, if we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, then we should be utterly ruined. And it was interesting that Rian Johnson said he'd been listening to a lot of these, podcasts that deal with Roman history because, of course, the first Pyrrhic victory, of course, is part of that Roman history archetype. And I think he decided to use this for Poe. So Poe gets lucky. He loses the entire bomber fleet, but they actually destroy this dreadnought. So, of course, he thinks that he makes the right decision in that situation. And, of course, Leia slaps him after that. And then he gets demoted. And then the second time, what occurs is that now that Leia is no longer in charge and Holdo is now keeping him out of the circle of information, he obviously assumes that he should have access to that information because, as I said before, he is at that time not emotionally ready to sit back and think and pause and ponder strategy. When you're trying to teach somebody, if they are not emotionally prepared for that lesson, it doesn't matter how intelligent they are, they're not going to receive it. They're not going to absorb it. If he had known the plan ahead of time, he still would have done this mutiny because he probably would have thought like, look, it's too risky. I understand the plan, but it's too risky. We need to go after them now. We need to do this and we need to think of other alternatives. and it would have played out almost the same way. The difference, though, is that the audience would not have fallen along with the journey that he was on to try to figure things out. He had to be embarrassed before he could finally sit down and just think like, wait a second, I'm not doing this correctly. There might be some other things that I need to think about and to consider. And sometimes you need a dose of cold water. And I think that that's what Rian Johnson was trying to convey, where Leia comes into the door and blasts him, and then he gets knocked out. And when he finally wakes up, he doesn't have a choice any longer because they're now enacting the plan and he's in the shuttle. And at that point in time, there's nothing he can do. So he has to now think about what's going on. And then he finally sees her wisdom. Whereas in the past, he wasn't ready for that lesson yet.
If you want to compare it to Maverick, even in his story in Top Gun, he loses his
wingman.
Yes. And it's when in a moment when he loses control, he has no control over the situation and he struggles to get that back. So it's very similar, thing that you do to the character. And, for definitely, the other thing people forget too is this is right on the heels of The Force Awakens. And we see in the movie that Poe is, despite being stripped from his rank, is still allowed in the med ward, which is the privileges of family. So that's a very cunning visual to say he's been stripped of rank, but he's still allowed to be with Leia. So if Leia's his mother, he's probably lost a father figure too, or at least if he sees Leia as a mother, he knows that his mother has lost somebody she loved. So there are so many things going on with that character in that moment and him trying to control it, just that way.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, of course, like you mentioned with Maverick. It's like, he does not like to listen to orders. He's gung-ho. He always wants to do things his own way. And we've seen this, this sort of military trope with ace pilots in various stories over and over again, even going back to, in the 50s, of course, with John Wayne and some of those types of roles as well. But Rian Johnson is a very subversive director, and he knows and he's aware of a lot of these paradigms, and he likes to turn them on their heads. And usually we go to films like this, and usually the people in command are the ones that are focusing so much on protocol and so much on, traditional strategies. They're not thinking outside of the box. And the rogue is usually the one that's the savior. And so that's what I was saying is like, usually you go through all of these things that Poe is, trying to get things together. He's, setting up this mutiny. He's sending Finn and Rose on this extra trip. They're trying to circumvent everything else, and they're going to be the ones to save the resistance. And what we find out, of course, is that it actually is not the case. It is much more realistic in a sense that those types of plans are usually the ones that don't work. It's sort of like when you're on your way somewhere and you don't know where you're going and you start thinking about shortcuts and you end up getting more lost than you actually are. That's real life. And that's what we wound up seeing. And that's why I was so riveted by it, because I'm like, wait a second, he's actually playing with us this whole time. And so his failure then leads to other characters, because like I said, the situation on Canto Bight with Rose and Finn, but ultimately, the characters who end up saving face, so to speak, and survive in the end are the ones who learn from their failure. So it's not just about failure per se. It's about Yoda has the most, prolific line in the entire film. He says failure is the best teacher. And that's very true. You got to look at that little child who can't walk and is learning how to walk, and they're going to keep falling and falling, but they're not afraid to fall. And if they were afraid to fall, they would still be crawling in 14, 15, 16 years old. You got to make those mistakes, and you have to embrace your faults, and then you learn from them. If you keep doing them, that's bad as well. But when you fall on your face, you learn how to get up. And that's something that Poe does do by the end of the film. He finally pauses and sits down and says, you know what, this is not going to work. It's a suicide mission. We need to retreat and fall back and figure something new out so that we survive this situation as best as possible. And he finally figured out, he learned from his mistakes. And that's something that Kylo doesn't learn. Because if Kylo was able to sit back and relax and pause and think in the moment, he would have realized that Luke wasn't there and that these people were getting away, and he would have ignored Luke, and the resistance would have been dead. But he then makes the same mistake that Poe was making earlier in the film And that's the reason why the Resistance is able to get away. And Poe realizes that Luke is actually there to distract him, and realizes instead of, caving into Finn's plan, saying, oh, we got to go help him out. No. This is your distraction. This is your opportunity to get away. It's not about the ships. It's not about the land. It's not about the bases. It's about survival. And until you can get into a situation where you can fight back and stand your ground, then you have to do other things. You have to be creative.
Right. Yeah, I mean, failure is the powerful teacher, like Yoda says. And I think it took Luke the longest time to learn this lesson, because he goes away from everything, and he decides, I'm not even going to try to be a Jedi. I'm not going to even try to teach again, because I failed so miserably the last time. And so it finally takes Yoda coming back to get some sense in him. And so he returns to fight. And that kind of is the same in relationships as well. You go out with a few people, you learn what you don't want. The failure of previous relationships really help you decide who you really want. I mean, that definitely worked for me.
Yeah, but for me, it really plays on Luke's character, because I've always kind of felt that he was like this, that he was very immature. And even when we see him in Return of the Jedi, even though he does see that there's good in Vader and he's starting to become a different person, there's still this piece of him, just like there was with Anakin, that is a very immature person at their core. And while it was important for Luke to maybe take a break away and to figure out what he was doing, if he really wanted to be a teacher of the Jedi, he would not have abandoned everyone and everything. And to me, that speaks volumes for what does happen at the end when he finally says, I mean, we don't see this conversation with himself, but sort of a, what am I doing? And that he has to do something, and it gives so much more power to the end. And actually, while I'm saying that, we had a listener, her name is Claire, she sent us an email, and she touched on this, and she said, I loved where his character went in The Last Jedi, and his appearance in the last part of the movie is now my favorite moment in the saga. After spending the original trilogy, and this movie for that matter, trying to learn and making mistakes, he finally is in complete control, and it's a badass moment. And she's right. He finally understands. He finally has grasped the concept that Yoda has been trying to teach him. And he makes this big, humongous gesture within the Force that, honestly, we really haven't seen Jedi be able to do. And it was stunning for me.
Yeah. What we oftentimes realize is that when we get older, we're still learning. In some cases, we have to relearn the same lessons that we learned when we were younger. And Luke is in that situation. He's gone through the tests and the trials, and then he has succeeded at the end of Return of the Jedi. And now he's starting to move forward. And then all of a sudden he gets back into a similar situation, and he's caught his own hype to the point where it now blocks him from thinking about all the lessons that he had learned in previous decades. And then he makes those fatal mistakes that lead him down this other path. And then from there, he's now destitute and distraught. And all of a sudden now you have these events that culminate to where he now finally recognizes, well, wait a second, perhaps, retreating from this is not the right path. And eventually he has to now accept that reality as well. And of course, it's Yoda that comes back to him, that teaches him yet again. And then, of course, you see his, a triumphant moment at the end of the film.
It's interesting because Luke's mindset is to just not make a choice. He just goes to an island where he isn't faced with making a choice. He's just allowing his end to come. And actually not making a choice is making a choice. That's a life lesson. You choosing to not do something, to not make a choice is making a choice. And it's there's a great duality in that Leia has the same personal tragedy in her life, but she's choosing to continue on. She's choosing to make new family members. You can see her bringing people into her family. She's bringing Poe. She's bringing Finn into her circle. She's bringing Rey into her circle. She's choosing to move past it. And Luke he's just hit a block. But the one thing we do know is he did accomplish quite a few things. We just don't see them. They tell us that he, built an academy. He had, students there. We see all the bodies in the one flashback of them laying there and what's happened. But that moment of losing all that, he just doesn't, he stops dealing with life. And knowing the Luke that we know, even in A New Hope, he doesn't decide to go to become a Jedi. He goes because he has no other choice. He's like, oh, my aunt and uncle are gone. I guess I'll go with that guy. So to me, it all ties in perfectly to the Luke Skywalker we know, who isn't very worldly. He didn't have a lot of education. He became this great heroic person, but there wasn't a lot there to back it up. He wasn't just a Jedi Master. We know he was a Jedi Master. In this, he actually ascended. He ascended to another level. And, as soon as I realized what was happening the first time I saw it, I'm like, oh, this isn't going to go well, because you can't use that much force power without there being a cost. So it was like when the end, when they showed him with his hand and him dragging himself up, I'm like, yeah, this is not good. But, I think in the end, what Luke didn't do, even with Vader, is he was unwilling to let go of the thought of his father being a bad person. That's what drove him to go to him. And this is the moment where he finally lets go of everything. So
right, and I felt the same way, which is why that final scene when he's looking off into the sun is just as equally stunning as when we obviously see him as a 19-year-old looking at those twin suns on Tatooine, and John Williams just nailing the music, and it's just it's just this powerful. Yeah, it's a powerful moment, and I love the camera angle that they use at the end when he finally disappears. It looks very biblical in that way.
All right, so I have a question about the twin suns moment, because on Ahch-To, I actually don't think that there's twin suns. I think we're just seeing what Luke is seeing. Do you guys?
No. In the visual dictionary, there are two suns.
Oh, okay.
And Pablo tweeted that out, which I actually was a little disappointed about.
Me too. I'm like, I thought that would be cool if that's what he was seeing.
There are scenes when there's only one sun.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Throughout the entire film, I didn't see more than one sun until that moment.
Right.
And it wasn't until, I saw Pablo's tweet before the visual dictionary, and I was like, oh, come on, y'all. That was the sundered heart of this film for me. I'm like, wait a minute. Come on, y'all.
Okay. Well, that's good to know. So Visual Dictionary has the answer on that one. And now the other thing I want to ask about is we haven't talked about Rey very much. And at the final scene between Rey and Kylo, there's this moment where Rey and the rest of the Resistance, having got their spark, they are escaping in the Millennium Falcon, and she looks at Kylo and then shuts the Millennium Falcon ramp, and she basically shuts the front door on Kylo. So Kylo is not right there, though, right?
Yeah, they're force timing again. Yeah, they're force timing one last time. He's initiated another force time. The connection still exists, and he initiates he's picking up the die that are imaginary that Luke left Leia, and I don't know if Luke's still projecting them or if Leia's projecting them or if it's just another manifestation, but he picks them up and realizes what does Luke say to him? No, Luke says to Leia, no one ever, see you around, kid, but also that would be more what his father would say. And he reaches out to Rey in a little force time, and that's because you hear the same kind of sound effect that happens, and then she shuts the door. She's like, yeah, I'm in your dad's ship with all your friends. Sad face.
So you guys started touching on something that is part of my complete Star Wars geekiness, which is Atlas planet things. So I ran and I got my visual dictionary. So in the visual dictionary, it says It is a uncharted world orbiting twin suns. The planet's mostly covered in oceans with scattered archipelagos dotting the restless waters. And then I just wanted to point out where Octo is kind of close to it's on the same side of the galaxy as Endor. It's actually not too far away from all of that. But what I find interesting is that Rose and Finn had to go from Dakar Crate area, which is down in the kind of outer rim, bottom part of the planet, all the way to Katanica, which is completely on the opposite side of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. It's like completely far away. And now when I look at it and I'm thinking about it, I'm like, how did they get there and then back and in the movie? Like, it just seems so far away.
Movie magic.
Well, you know that every hyperspace lane is 3 minutes long, right?
'Tis true.
I wish they would show me all that on here. Just those funny little things I like to geek out about. Atlases of planets.
So we love to have people write in, and you guys were writing in. So we picked some of the great feedback we got. Christine Mitchum, who said she loved to listen to the podcast and that we've ended up a favorite. So thank you very much. I'm going to go down a little bit because she left us a really long email, and it's really wonderful. Going in, I could have called about 80% of the big moves, but the constant misdirection and the way Luke's experience was told bit by bit, and each new bit changed the way he was seen. So much so that I understand why he was on the good and bad side of some of the pictures before the movie came out. His motivations were understandable at every turn, even if you didn't agree. That ability to make you change your opinion of him through Rey's journey was some masterful storytelling, especially with a familiar, beloved character. And I just liked how that, how she brings up what happened, especially how Rey was sort of our window to Luke and to Kylo. She was our point of view character into both of them, which I think was an interesting way to tell the story of two characters who ended up facing off at the end.
Yeah, and I really like what she says about the misdirection. I feel like they did a really good job with that. And I know that if there's one controversy in fandom right now, it is all centered around Luke and the way Luke's story is being handled or was handled in this movie. And so I think that all that misdirection is what's causing a lot of the upset. And also, it doesn't help that we've had so long to sort of come up with our own versions of Luke in our head, and so many people have done that. But I think the way they chose to tell this particular story with Luke was great. And to piggyback off of that, Garrett Sessions said, I understand why Mark had such reservations about the direction of the story at the beginning, but his story arc was so brilliant and relatable, and at the end, he was truly the Jedi Knight the Resistance needed. And I think that is a really good point. What he did at the end was what was needed at the end. We didn't need the Luke from Return of the Jedi. We needed this Luke.
Yeah, I know Michael DeStefano, he wrote, Luke's finale is overwhelmingly exciting and emotional. He had this Luke/Obi-Wan/Yoda aura, and it looks like he had a different reaction during his second viewing. He says that I had a different reaction to his last words, "See you around, kid," during my second viewing. Many in the theater laughed, and I thought his words sounded like something Han Solo would say. I thought maybe they were Han's last words to Ben Solo before handing him over to Luke for training, and Luke knew they would strike Kylo deeply?
That very well could be.
Yeah. Maybe Kylo carries those words of his father with him, which causes some or most of his pain. Because even though he killed his past, it's still with him.
He never answers the Rey's question. Kylo never does. Why did you kill Han Solo? I mean, he totally flips that conversation around. And I was like, come on, tell us why. I have to know. And he doesn't answer it.
Mm-mm. But of course, he's a master manipulator. He's not going to let you into him. He wants to get into you. And, Maya Angelou always used to say, when people tell you who they are, then believe them. And that's the failure that Rey has at the end, until she realizes that when after they, he goes after Snoke and they kill Snoke, and of course they fight the Praetorian Guards, and she thinks that that's the moment when he's going to turn. He is a villain, and he's always been that villain, and she knew better than that, but she trusted in the possibility of Ben Solo coming back, and he knew that she wanted that a lot, and so he used that because ultimately, Snoke was the stepping stone for him to finally get into a position of power that he really wanted. And he knew, and that, when I'm getting back to the story of failure, Snoke's failure is thinking that he could use and manipulate the Force and the abilities in both of them to bring them together so that she would then come to him, so that he would then kill her, and then Kylo would be fully enslaved under his power. And what he didn't realize is that, Kylo's hatred for him was so great that he could still project his idea that he is going to kill his ultimate enemy. And of course, Snoke, thinking that it was Rey, it was actually him, and he let his guard down. As powerful as he was, he got complacent. And that was a lesson that he didn't learn. And that's ultimately what led to his death, which I thought was wonderful.
I know, Sarah, that you got to see Rian Johnson recently.
Yeah. And it's interesting because, this rift in fandom is happening, and the whole, there's controversy over The Last Jedi because some people don't like what's happening to it. And actually at LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, that's what it's called. Yeah, LACMA. They do this film series where they invite directors in, ask them what movie they would like to watch with a bunch of people, and then they have a discussion afterward about that film, their influences, basically a movie that's influenced that director. And so Rian Johnson was there, and he decided to watch American Graffiti and wanted to talk about that influence on him as a filmmaker and on George Lucas. So it was really awesome. We got to see American Graffiti in a full house of 600 people and everyone laughing at the right moments. Harrison Ford singing Some Enchanted Evening. It was amazing. And then Rian Johnson was talking for about 45 minutes after the film. And one of the things he mentioned is they kind of went through his filmography and how he made this movie called Looper. And you know what? Rian Johnson has even learned from his mistakes because he's directed 3 films. One was Brick, which got a pretty good attendance. Then he did.
I love that film. I love that film.
Okay. See, I haven't seen any of his films and I feel bad. They're on my list now. Then he did The Brothers Bloom. And he said it's a very personal film, but it basically bombed. And he was a very personal, self-indulgent film. And he kind of learned from his mistakes there. And he still loves the film, but understands why it bombed. And so with Looper, he looked to write a very tight script. That was just, it was, hold on, where did my thing go? It was a tight script, very polished, and within a specific genre. And then within that genre, he subverted the genre in interesting ways. And basically that's what he likes to do. And as he was talking about Looper, it sounded like he was talking about The Last Jedi, because that's exactly what he did. And Rian Johnson even said in this talk that he likened Star Wars to its own genre, and that he did try to do that same thing, right? A very tight, interesting script, but then subvert some of the expectations. And I think that's why we have this rift in fandom, because some people didn't like that. They didn't like their genre subverted. And some people enjoyed that, oh, let's turn things on their head and let's see what happens.
I certainly did.
Yeah.
It's interesting too, because a lot of I'd say that, there are people who didn't like the movie, mm-hmm. and there are people who didn't like the movie who went out of their way to make bots, brag about making bots, to load things up, which the media bought into, which is a little bit back to the prequel days when people say nobody liked the prequel trilogies. I beg to differ on the numbers on that. Mm-hmm. And we've seen over time how people are willing to say, I don't like something a million times over instead of just their one time. So I think that there's a healthy group of people who didn't like the movie, and there will always be that in Star Wars. Anything where you have expectations like this, there are going to be people who don't like something. But one of the things that's important is just to be respectful of whether people like or don't like it and why they do or don't. If somebody doesn't like something, it's not saying, didn't like it, I don't like you because you liked it. So it's just a kind of a lesson learned. And I think maybe sometimes when we talk about riffs, we're giving it more energy than it actually has or should have. People just had different opinions of the movie.
Yeah, it's well said.
Yeah, I predicted this was going to happen because if Lucasfilm was going to allow Rian Johnson to do this film as he wanted to do it, he was going to do something that was going to provoke a response. That's just the way he approaches his art. And so I knew a year out, I said, if they allow him to do what he wants to do, then people are going to walk out of this film and they're going to have questions. They're going to be confused about certain things. They're going to be thrilled at other things. And so, when people started doing that before I actually got a chance to see the film, I was like, yeah, this is a Rian Johnson film. Unfortunately, I think we as a country in general, and I think Star Wars fandom is a microcosm of that. We in general have forgotten the art of discourse. And we've gotten into, very much the name calling and very much the mean spiritedness. And this can happen on multiple sides. And that's where it starts to break down and where it becomes personal and where it becomes infighting and it becomes immature. And that's what I think we have to get away from. We can agree to disagree. We can talk about things. I'd love to discuss and debate things back and forth. But when it becomes personal, that's when I tune out. That's when I'm like, that's not for me. That's not why I came here.
Yeah.
Well, and it should, I remember back in the prequel trilogy I really liked what the Phantom Menace set up. And then I started to struggle with Anakin as the movies went along. And I remember there was a fanfic writer who wrote a lot of Anakin stories. And it was just I thought her stories were interesting, and she certainly wasn't doing what the movies were doing. So that gave me a little bit. I'm like, so why are you attracted to Anakin as a character? I just had the conversation with her, and because I really didn't see what she saw in the character. And she told me, she goes, he reminds me of my son. My son has had all the right opportunities and made all the wrong decisions. And that was her personal insight, and it made sense. And typically when somebody doesn't like something, there really is a core reason why they don't like it. And, but then it's just sometimes just trying to get past it and not having that. I mean, you guys were at Geek Girl Con. You remember there were some people who really I don't like Rogue One for a lot of reasons, but that's not personal on anybody who likes Rogue One. I know there are people who love Rogue One. I didn't like it, but that doesn't mean don't like people who like Rogue One. But sometimes people don't see that. They see that as you're talking critically about it. You don't like me. It's not the case at all. So that's where it's true. We aren't very good at having constructively critical conversations in America. It doesn't happen very, very, very often anymore. You just hear, I don't like, or this did, and then the tune out happens. So,
right. Well, I think we can all agree that we liked the music to The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Raise your hand if you liked it. Oh wait, you can't see it. No. Well, I just wanted to bring up a couple tracks that I thought were really compelling and really stood out to me in the film. And one of them is The Spark. And this is what is playing when Luke arrives on Crate, and they have his whole moment where he faces off against the First Order. And so let's go through this a little bit. So of course, Luke arrives on Crate and the music is playing very quietly. And then when Luke sees Leia, you get Luke and Leia's theme in the low strings with the cello. And I don't know about you, but for me, this totally brought back memories of that blue light soaked bridge scene in Return of the Jedi, and how just beautiful it is, and just low, and it's Luke and Leia. And I think that's the only time in all the Star Wars movies that you hear Luke and Leia's theme, which is very fascinating. So to bring that back, it just really was a touching moment for me. And also, then of course, that dovetails into Han and Leia's theme when Luke gives her the dice. And similarly, in that bridge scene in Return of the Jedi, that's where the music, Han comes out on the bridge after Luke leaves, and you get the Han and Leia theme there. So it's kind of fun that John Williams was mimicking himself in a good way there, or mirroring the two scenes, if you like.
Yeah, and there were a number of callbacks in this soundtrack that I was surprised by, but also pleasantly surprised. Like at the very beginning, obviously you have the opening crawl, and then there's that Piccolo right from A New Hope, and it's like, oh wait a minute, he went back to this.
Yeah, I was actually surprised by that.
I was really surprised.
Yeah.
Really
I'm not sure the meaning of that. I mean, I'm trying to think, like, I almost wish he would have done something different there rather than bring back that same thing. But that sounds blasphemous to say that I almost wish John Williams did something different. So, strike that. No.
The way I took it eventually is I thought that, obviously because there is a lot of callback to the original Star Wars, including when Luke gets onto the Falcon, and of course he sees R2, and then he's like, look, I ain't coming back. And then of course here comes the recording, and then you get that replay. Of course you have at the end with the twin sons. So I think what John was looking at all of these together, and I think he started thinking, well, wait a second, this might be an opportunity because there's so much foreshadowing going on from the character's perspective. Maybe I'll foreshadow the music as well. And so maybe that's the reason why he put that in there at the beginning of this film, because a lot of the original Star Wars is foreshadowed in various ways, either through metaphor or through direct callbacks. And so maybe that's the reason why he did it.
Yeah. Well, something that's new is if you listen to the Spark and you continue listening, this is when Luke walks out and faces the First Order. You get this repeating minor chord. It's like over and over and over again, and it's almost like imitating something like this thorn in Kylo Ren's side. It's almost like what Kylo Ren feels in his head when he sees Luke is like this headache that keeps on beating him and beating him and beating him. And it also kind of is showing, that's also playing when Kylo Ren, tells all the guns to fire on Luke, and yet Luke is still there. And so I just think that's such a great way of explaining through music what Luke is doing and how it's affecting Kylo Ren. So I think The Spark is just a really amazing track. And then we head to Peace and Purpose, which of course is named after what Rey and Leia feel when Luke leaves. So sad. And this portrays Luke's final moments on Ahch-To. And as you said, Ajwa, this is where you get that track of the Force theme playing again, almost identical to when Luke is looking out on the binary sunset. Then you get the swell of the orchestra as Luke disappears and becomes one with the Force. And then one thing I find really interesting is, the movie cuts back to the Millennium Falcon and Rey meets Poe. And what theme is playing under that?
Tell me.
Okay, I'll tell you. It's actually Poe's triumphant flying theme, only it's played by woodwinds in a soft way as Poe and Rey meet, and it's almost played like, wait for it, a love theme!
And people say, I don't know how anybody could possibly ship them over one scene of dialogue.
I know, but you know what? John Williams ships them.
That's so fun.
I thought that was amazing. So now I want to hear Poe's flying theme as a 3-minute love theme, concert love theme as composed by John Williams. I'm waiting for that. The next time he comes to the Hollywood Bowl, that's what I'm going to hear. All right? John Williams, you heard it here first.
The man votes with his music. So I think we may actually get that, and it may become canon.
I know. That would be amazing. All right, so that was my little tidbit on the music for this time. If you want to hear more about the music, you'll have to head over to Skywalking Through Neverland in a couple weeks.
Awesome. So should we jump into our character discussion?
Absolutely.
Sidious, Anakin, Luke and Leia, Qui-Gon Jinn, C.O. Bibble, Kylo Ren, Salacious Crumb, Bib Fortuna, Boba Fett, Amidala, Wicket, R2-D2, BB-8, I can barely keep it straight. It's a character discussion. It's the fangirls on character. It's a character discussion.
All right, for the character discussion, we wanted to focus on one character from The Last Jedi, and it is going to be Vice Admiral Amilyn Holdo.
She's my new favorite character.
Aww.
And she died.
I know.
Yeah, you know, she's hard for me. I'll be honest. She's hard because, and I was mentioning this earlier, I really like her as a character, but I really gravitated towards her in the Leia, the Princess of Alderaan novel. And I had really hoped that that character portrayal of her in the book would kind of travel over into the movie, and it definitely did not. And that was sort of something that took me a little bit aback, and I had to sort of adjust. But once I got used to the kind of character they were going to give us in the movie, this is why this changed for me. I began to accept her for who she is, and I really think that she needs more merchandise, and we need to be doing #Where's Amilyn, because the only piece of merchandise that I am aware of is a minifigure and a Lego set that is not readily available. It is in the Resistance Bomber set, and it's not, I saw it at Target today, but it's not at a lot of retailers, and it's actually not in a lot of Lego stores. It's on lego.com, and I don't know why. And she's the only place you can get some Amilyn Holdo merchandise, unless somebody knows of something I don't.
You can pre-order a GameStop Funko.
Oh, okay. Okay, so there is one coming out.
There's one other thing, but other than that, there's not a lot of Holdo merchandise. So yes, especially considering, I mean, she's rocking that awesome purple hair and the whole mauve dress. So
I need Amilyn Holdo merchandise, and I need Crystal Fox merchandise.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of that either.
No.
I think the lawyers are still like, are they going to poke people's eyes out? Go, Adjua.
No, I got to say that it's funny. She looks exactly like my current high school principal, without the amethyst hair, obviously. But I'm saying when she's standing there giving that first speech, they look like twins. It's ridiculous. I can't get that out of my head every time I see her. But I agree, Teresa. There was an interview with Donald Gleason, and I think some people were asking him about some of the details that they had gotten. They were able to glean some of the information on his character. I think it was from most likely it was probably from the Captain Phasma novel, I think it was. But they were asking him some questions about that, and he was totally oblivious to a lot of this. And he said he had wished that they had given that information to him, and he would have incorporated that in his portrayal in the character. And I think that's true for a lot of these films. Like, these books are coming out, and a lot of us who are super fans were, devouring a lot of this information, especially if it's a really good book. We get invested in those characters and the information that comes out of it, and none of it translates in many respects to the films. And in many respects, a lot of the actors, they want that kind of background information. They want that, that backstory, so that it helps inform their decisions when they're in front of the camera. So I wish they did do that more.
I would say, though, just, one thing, since I do, a book show, and Trisha, I know you read a lot of the books too. I think a lot of it does translate. It's just the places it doesn't is like in the portrayal of some of these newer characters, because the books, I just really don't think Claudia Gray had all the information about, and the timeline. I guess that's also part of it. We don't know when she was writing Leia, Princess of Alderaan, and what was happening with the films in production, and what she
Laura
got.
Dern had already shot her films. That came out. I believe it was Pablo Hidalgo who talked about that when some people discussed it. And having written some Star Wars books, I can tell you the timelines are incredibly tight, and it's typically in conjunction with things. So, it can be a little bit where someone's, I think, it seems like Claudia knew she was going to wear interesting clothes. She was going to have this style and flair. And because the story's so tight, anything else just about the character just doesn't come through because of what happens. One of my favorite scenes, though, is the goodbye to Leia.
Oh.
And I know that Carrie Fisher and Laura Dern worked on that scene personally together to make sure it had the right tone and the right, heft of what they needed for that moment to make sure that people saw them as friends and it is being a willing sacrifice. And it's a beautiful scene. I thought that was the most natural that Carrie Fisher looked in the whole movie, as far as it just felt like they were just doing that together and we were just happened to be there getting to enjoy it.
Yeah, like a fly on the wall. I agree with you. The acting there was almost like it wasn't acting. It was just two people together that really, truly got each other. And that one scene is the scene that sort of has made me turn around on a film version of Holdo to really appreciate her. And I think I needed that scene because she was just so hard on everyone. And it helped me understand why, among other things, and just how much Leia trusted her helped me to really process her.
There's been a lot of controversy around the interplay between Holdo and Poe. We talked about Poe early in the show and how it plays out. There's an in-universe and an out-of-universe dynamic that's going on. In universe, she knows that Poe made a call and that Leia, who's a friend of hers, demoted him, and that it was a risky decision. She also has a lot of things going on, and they don't know, even though we think via Rose and Finn that there's active tracking going on, there's every reason to suspect there's a spy on board. And they have not eliminated. The story is an unreliable narrator in and of itself. Active tracking is something that they figured out. It's not something that is true. It's a possibility. So from Holdo's point of view, she doesn't know if they figured out how to track them or if there's a spy on board. There's every reason for her to not make known what is happening. But you just don't want the plan to get out, and some people aren't going to agree with it, and you certainly don't want them to know where you're going, and so that's part of her end game too. So there's a dynamic where the movie actually kind of, when they first confront each other, Poe, and who we know is a hero and a good person, confronts her, there's actually menacing music that makes it seem like she's a menace to us. That's what the music says. And so it creates this dynamic but she's an antagonist to Poe's journey. She's not an antagonist to the resistance itself. And so there's an interesting way some people view it. I believe that this is exactly the same situation that happens in 12 O'Clock High, where you see people being confronted with difficult decisions and your flyboy leader getting sat down for a while because it's not the right way and there's hard choices. So it's mirroring this movie very much, and that there's never a right decision and there's never like a best decision, but there's decisions that have to be made, and that's where she is in that moment. And
let's not forget that Eisenhower did the same thing to Patton.
Yes,
for the very same reasons in World War II. People forget about that.
Yes, there's a lot of history involved in how that happens. And she's in the military chain of command. She's very much in the right to. He has no right on her bridge to demand information.
Right. Yeah, that never occurred to me that she might be withholding information because she thinks there's a spy on board. But now that you say it, that makes perfect sense. I guess to us, we know Poe. We've seen him in a previous film. We know he's a good guy. But why should she think he is? So, never thought about it that way.
And she says he's proven rash, and that's where she needs somebody. She needs people who are measured and that she trusts in that moment. From her perspective, she's the last thing she needs to deal with, and probably she thinks that he doesn't need to deal with this right now either. Okay. At that point, I mean, his space mom has been blown out of the ship and back in, and he's in a very bad place. So she's making decisions. And I think that little scene where she says, I like him. Mm-hmm. I believe that scene right there shows that there was a lot more compassion in the character, that she's just doing what she had to do in the moment.
Right, right. Well, you know what? I've listened to some podcasts and I've heard some things, and, there's some people who are saying that she and Leia should have switched roles, for the sacrifice scene. Like Leia should have been in the ship that took out the big ship via hyperspace, and Admiral Holdo should have gone on to stay with the Resistance. So what do we think about that?
I've actually heard people say that should have been Admiral Akbar that should have did that instead of getting blasted. My God. And then they just kind of just dismiss it like, oh yeah, and Admiral Akbar died too, and oh well, and then we move on. But I think people, when they say that, I think they're thinking about reality in real life and the fact that Carrie is no longer with us, mm-hmm. and wondering about the film, and they're critiquing these scenes and these decisions post-mortem. And at this time, when they were writing the story, obviously this was a few years ago. And then of course, when they were filming last year and a half, obviously nobody knew that Carrie wasn't going to be with us at this point in time. And from what we understand, she was supposed to be a central focus in the next film. Mm-hmm. And that, of course, wouldn't have happened if they had decided to kill her off in this film. So
there's actually a through line. I wrote about it in Fangirl blog that Leia is, when she leaves the bridge, she never comes back to command. Holdo is still in command. She has not taken back the general. And one of the things that the Jedi did wrong was become generals. That was one of their mistakes in the prequel trilogies, was accepting the mantle in Attack of the Clones of General. We are in the second movie. I think that there's a lot of symbolism in Leia personally giving up the title of general. And the intention at the end of the movie was that it was going to be Leia and Rey rebuilding the Jedi Order. And she actually, when she comes out with the cane, she's Gandalf the White. She's also having an ascension, and she's Yoda with the cane. There's a deliberate homage to that. So Leia is having an ascension, and at the same time Luke is in the same movie. She's coming into a role. She's renouncing the role as a general and a military leader, and she's going to become a leader of the Jedi Order. She's going to help Rey rebuild it. They have the books. They have everything they need. That's the closing shot. And Ryan, that was the story he was telling. So he decided not to change the story. And I think it was the right call, because it fundamentally changes his through line of what he was doing with the character, which was allowing her to build to a place that Leia had never been allowed to go to in the story of Star Wars ever, right?
Yeah.
So. I agree. And I don't think they should have switched places. I think Audrey, you're right. When people are saying that, they're thinking about the reality of what the situation actually is now, not what the reality of the storytelling was at the time. And for the people that are saying things about Akbar, I love Akbar, but no. But no.
I was waiting for that.
And, something else I found that was cool as I was reading the visual dictionary, I think it's really cool that the ship is the Raddus, because they named it after Admiral Raddus from Rogue One, which I thought was a really neat thing that you don't really hear in the movie, but you kind of pick up as you read the ancillary material that I just happen to really love.
There's also a nod to Rogue One, or to this movie in Rogue One, in that one of the assets that Jyn reads is hyperspace tracking. Yeah. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So those are all like really cool things, but definitely no. Now, I do have a question. Was Holdo's sacrifice necessary? Now, I know we needed to distract them from getting because everybody needed to get to the surface. But was it necessary for her to have to sacrifice herself? Like, I wish she was still alive.
So I have a simple answer to this. Rian Johnson created too many new characters and was like, oh no, now we got to get rid of a few. There we go. No.
I think her sacrifice is meant to show. I mean, we see early in the movie that young people die in this. Obviously, Akbar has a tragic death considering all the space battles he's been in. He made it that far, but hers is a very poignant death in the decision she makes. I mean, that literally is one of my favorite scenes. What's going on in Snoke's ship and what she does to cut through it, and just the way it happens, the coloring, how they inverted what we normally see with the white background and the lack of sound. It's just an amazing scene.
Yeah, it's very anime. You know, it's very anime. One of the shows I used to grow up with, of course, and Dave Filoni, who also is from Pittsburgh, like myself, and we're about the same age. We're both Robotech fans, and one of the things you oftentimes see, especially in the first generation with Rick Hunter and the SDF-1, is when they fire the main gun, and it looks exactly like that. And there are other anime examples that look like that as well. And so he brought that in, and anybody who's an anime fan, we all were like, oh my goodness, he's an anime fan. So, and it was just the perfect shot, and this, just with the silence and everything, everybody is quiet and sudden. Everybody's like, you just hear all of this coming out when that scene comes up. And, it's just, I think it's probably one of the most beautiful moments in all the Star Wars films, just from a visual standpoint, from an artistic standpoint, even from a sound, the fact that there is no sound. That choice to do it that way, I thought that's just one of the most stellar scenes in the entire film. But I think ultimately in this film, like you said, there's a huge body count. There's a lot of carnage. And I think that was the whole point behind it, is in order for a lot of the survivors to learn that lesson, that the people in that movement are more important than their cruisers, than their ships, than their X-Wings, than the bombers. It's their lives. And if they're not around, that resistance dies. And I think they don't really appreciate that lesson unless most of them are gone. So when you can have all of these cruisers, and like they said, they had about 400 or 500 people at the beginning of the film, and the only ones left, they can all fit on the Millennium Falcon. That's astonishing. That is absolutely astonishing, because you usually don't see that in a Star Wars film. It's another example of subverting the normal paradigm we usually see in films like this.
Who needs ships? You can just run ships through other ships. We're good. Well, I mean, it's her mission statement when we meet her, right? We need to survive. We're not going to win a war today. All we're going to do is survive. And, it took Poe a while to figure that out, but he came around.
Absolutely.
So, Audra, thank you so much for being on the show with us today. If people wanted to interact with you and kind of have conversations with you, where can they find you?
Let's put it this way. You can definitely find me on Twitter, Audra_Adama. Of course, obviously, over at the Fangirls Going Rogue, discussion group and that sort of thing as well, especially.
Nice.
So between now and then, if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us over at fangirlsgoingrogue.com. That's where you can see all of the show notes for the shows and links and stuff that we put up there. You can also see some really cool things related to other shows that we do. We kind of post some of the other goings on for all of us there on our website. You can find us on Twitter at FGGoingRogue. Trisha is at Fangirl Cantina. I am at Ice Cold Penguin. Sarah is at Jedi Tink. And our social media manager, Sandra, is at Geek Chic 9.
You can email us, contact@fangirlsgoingrogue.com. Facebook, just type Fangirls Going Rogue. And Tumblr, let's see, I got a lot of things going on there. A lot of Poe, a lot of Finn, a lot of Rey, a lot of Kylo. Fangirlsgoingrogue.tumblr.com.
And if you want to find us on Instagram, we are at FG Going Rogue over there. And please, as we are mentioning, join our Facebook group. You just have to head to Facebook, search Fangirls Going Rogue group, request to join. It's a closed, safe group, and you have to answer those 2 questions that pop up. And if you want to leave us a voicemail, that is 331-21-EWOKS.
And please go to iTunes and leave a positive 5-star review. We need your reviews so more people will find us.
And also head over to YouTube. You can listen to us there if you prefer that. We are youtube.com/ Fangirls Going Rogue. So until next time, everyone. Da 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 da. Yub.
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 Yep, yep.
Trisha, is your puppy nearby?
My puppy is out of the room.
I have a question about the puppy. Do you have other dogs too?
Yes.
Okay, so this is just a new puppy to all the dogs.
He's part of the pack now.
What kind of dog is he? Because he's super cute.
Hmm?
What kind of dog is he?
He's a Poshy.
So
Poshy.
What's a Posh?
That's
I was trying to figure it out.
Sheltie cross with a Pomeranian.
That's a Pomeranian Sheltie. Okay. Because I've heard, no, that's a Husky Pomeranian, a Pomsky. So
Pomsky.
You're a Poshy. Okay, I get it.
Poshy. Pomskys are really cute too.
Yeah.